Hello and welcome to I Talk to Ghosts, the podcast that tends to emerge from the harbor fog on a night just like this. I'm your haunted host, Jennifer, a spirit medium and a collector of ghost stories. And tonight I have spectral tales of hauntings at sea, or at the very least, ghosts on a boat. And after the spooky, I have a new spirit reading of the week to share with you. If you're curious about what a medium reading could look like, how messages come through, and how specific it can be, I am so happy to provide this segment of the podcast for you. Sure, I could tell you about readings I've done, but I'm so grateful I can show you by recording a spirit reading with a podcast guest. I'll also tell you later how you can sign up to be a guest yourself. And even if you're not sure being on a podcast is necessarily your thing, stick around for after the reading. I will also do a message from the spirits for someone listening to the podcast right now. So this message could very well be specifically for you. That's later on in the podcast. But for now, we're going to keep things a little more spooky than spiritual. The ghosts are sailing in right now. I must have been around the age of 15 when my grandfather took me out in his small boat to go night fishing. We took to the sea around 5 p.m. and had hoped to have a successful night. The water was calm and the air was slightly warm. Usually that means it would rain, but the sky was fair and mostly clear. After sunset, we could see the stars and the moon. We were not too far from the coast, maybe 3 or 4 miles away, when we reached the place my grandfather knew was a great spot, and we cast our lines. It was a quiet night, and we didn't talk much. We were in the open sea, but above a section where the sea floor bed rose closer to the water's surface, where my grandfather knew the fish liked to gather. We had been fishing for a good 4 hours and had caught a fair amount of fish. By accident, the current had made us drift, and we discovered that we had been carried quite far from the coast. Grandfather tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't catch. He tried again and again, but nothing happened. Fortunately, the sea continued to be calm. In those days, we were not equipped for safety as we are today. No radio, no cell phones, or life jackets. And with the boat not starting, we ended up drifting for another hour. Of course, we had stopped fishing and were trying to figure out what to do and what would happen. All kinds of dark thoughts got a hold of me, and I imagined myself dying of thirst on the boat in the middle of the sea, or being rocked by a wave, tumbling out and drowning in these dark waters full of scary creatures. When suddenly, strangely, we started to hear music. It sounded like music from the 1940s. We looked around and there were no other boats, nothing that could have been a source for the sound. Just empty night and dark water. The coast was now quite far away, maybe 7 or 8 miles, and it would have been impossible for music from the coast to be able to reach us. The atmosphere was eerie. Then the sounds grew louder, with the sound of people talking. We tried to look for a ship, but there was nothing to be found. There was no mist, and the sky was fair. We should have seen it. We were even under the light of a quarter moon, which was now high in the sky. We started to panic. Now, try to imagine what it's like to feel lost on the sea at night, plus starting to hear spooky things. The cocktail sound became closer, and there was still nothing around us. Grandfather was frantically trying to start the engine again. The music stopped, and now we could hear whispers all around us. My grandfather and I exchanged glances, not sure what to say to each other. I felt as if I was becoming feverish from fright. I got a hold of the cable of the engine and pulled as hard as I could to start it. The engine started and Grandfather pushed me aside and grabbed the throttle. We shot straight to the coast as quickly as we dared in the dark night. Eventually we made it after almost an hour. The whispers had stayed behind. We were so scared when we reached the beach that we forgot all our gear in the boat, leaving it behind as we hurried for home. Eventually, we asked around to discover there were no known shipwrecks in the area, and no other fishermen had experienced what we had. Some say they have encountered strange animals, and others think that they saw ghosts floating above the water, but not in the same area, and nothing at all like what we had experienced that night. The experience that I'm about to relate is true. It happened to my sister Debbie. She and I are very close, and she had never believed in ghosts until this happened. She remarried in 1993, and her new husband and 3 young stepsons had been living a free and unconventional lifestyle on a sailboat that was anchored in the Banana River at Merritt Island, Florida. They had been living on the sailboat for about 3 weeks when they began to notice some strange things. It started simply enough, with sharp knocking sounds that came late at night in the upper midsection of the boat. They were accustomed enough by now to the boat's own noises, the waves lapping against the hull, the wind in the rigging, or the fish that made little noises underneath, to know that these sounds were different. A few times, on those rare occasions where either Debbie or her husband was alone on board late in the evening, they heard the low, soft sounds of whispers coming from somewhere in the forward section, too muffled to understand words, but too distinct to be anything else. On 2 of these occasions, the night was still and the river calm, with no other boats in the vicinity to account for the sound. Sometimes they would hear what sounded like footsteps in the early morning hours that would start in the cockpit, pace back towards the stern along the upper deck, and then double back again towards the bow of the boat. More than once, they got up to make sure that no passing stranger had boarded their boat. There was never anyone else on board, and there was usually not even other boats around them. Their cat seemed to be more sensitive to the unseen occupant than any of the humans on board. Many times, her hackles would go up and she would hiss and run from something no one else could see. One night, my sister was awakened at about 3 a.m. by a sound to the right near her head. She rolled to face that direction and opened the privacy curtain that separated her bunk from the rest of the room. On the step, next to the bunk, was the figure of a person who was headed towards the galley. At first, she thought it was her oldest boy, 12-year-old Jason. The figure was dressed in a short-sleeved white shirt and had collar-length gray-looking hair. Jason had shoulder-length blonde hair and usually wore a white t-shirt to bed. The boys did have to pass through her room at night to get to the galley for a drink of water. She closed her eyes and waited for him to walk back through on his way back to bed. When she heard the sound of dishes clanking in the galley, she thought that was okay. He was getting a drink. The sounds stopped for a few minutes, and when he didn't walk back through on his way to bed, she opened her eyes and said, "Okay, back to bed now." No answer. She turned on the light, sat up, and looked out into the galley. She had a wide open view of the galley and the bathroom area from where she sat, but there was no one there or anywhere in that end of the boat. When she checked, the boys were all still asleep. Now, thinking about this experience later, she realized that the figure had been a man, taller, and not all slightly built like Jason. He had also been wearing long dark pants, and the white shirt had not seemed to be that of a soft cotton t-shirt, but something crisper, like a lab coat. In doing some checking about the boat's history, she contacted the broker they had bought it from. It turned out that its original owner had been an old doctor who retired after a long career to a life of sailing around the Caribbean with his much younger wife, and hired a sailboat captain who did all the driving. The good doctor's wife and the captain ended up having an affair and left the doctor marooned in some West Indies port one day. It was 2 years before the doctor caught up with them and his beloved sailboat. The boat was much worse for wear, and it was eventually left in a boat graveyard in Fort Pierce. My sister could never find out if the doctor was still alive or not, but they had a feeling that he wasn't. Since then, Deb and Paul sold the boat to a couple of guys who were going to fix it up even more and live on it. They must not have lived on it very long, and they never did fix it up, because it's still here, anchored in the river, abandoned, waiting, at least until the next hurricane or until someone comes along who's willing to restore her and doesn't mind sharing this space with the owner who loved her best of all. Book a medium reading with me. If you have a past loved one you would like to connect with, a spirit reading can be an amazing and never spooky experience. I strive to give you specific details that align only to you and your loved ones. Curious? Visit italktoghosts.com for links to book with me. I can't wait to meet you. Welcome back to I Talk to Ghosts. My guest this evening is Gabi. Gabi, welcome to the podcast and welcome to your spirit reading. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you for this reading. I'm really excited for the reading. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm really excited to do it.
Excited is the best kind of energy to bring. Okay. So the first thing that came to me was an older man, and he showed me all kinds of medication bottles.
It's wild that you say that because my dad is alive, but he has Alzheimer's and takes a lot of medications. And I call him twice a day, every day to take his pills. And he is constantly confused about his medications. And it's a really stressful thing to deal with. So I don't know if that's something that could be that, but it could also be my grandfather on my mom's side who had dementia and was in a similar situation, and he has passed.
Okay. There seems to be a woman who it feels like she would rather talk about everyone else and not about herself. So I don't know if you know about that personality at all. It's almost like she's hiding a bit.
I don't know how much you want me to tell you. How much do you want me to tell you?
I can tell you other things. There was someone who was coming in kind of earthy and gentle as a personality. Sometimes I have to play this mystery game of connecting the dots. So I just want to tell you things that were coming through.
Okay.
There was a woman who smiled at me, and I knew she was related to you because her smile and right here look like you.
Okay.
Okay. So is that connecting some dots for you?
Yeah.
Earlier today, I smelled. Do you know anyone who went thrift shopping? I smelled a thrift store.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like all of my grandparents' homes were literal thrift stores.
Okay, it could be that, but that's what it smelled like. It smelled like a thrift store, and I also smelled cologne. It wasn't overbearing. It wasn't offensive, but there was also it smelled like a male scent, for lack of a better word. So both of those things came in hand.
Okay,
Okay,
that makes sense.
Okay, I pay attention to suggestions in my brain or things that I'm doing that I don't normally do. And when I came down here to do my prep work, I had to clean the space first. Specifically, I have wires and plugs all over the place because not only is this kind of my seance parlor, but there's a camera and lights and cords. There's cords everywhere, right? And I had to clean up the cords. And as I was doing so, it's like, no, don't put that one under the rug. That's a fire hazard. And then I had to make everything neat and tidy. And then when I left for the evening, I was told to go unplug something over there because I shouldn't leave that there either. That was a fire hazard as well. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm getting a little paranoid about stuff. He was presenting himself like a father figure to you, but kind of removed. So I'm like, is this a stepdad or is this just an estranged father? And they were showing me heavy work gloves, not snow gloves, heavy utility gloves, and boots, the tall black boots, also work boots. And described him as really successful. It's important for him to have some kind of legacy, he wanted to build something.
What you've described sounds like my papa, my mom's dad, who passed away, the one that I was saying had dementia.
Okay.
He, I actually was really, really close with him. And I always joke that he's where I get my stupid sense of humor from. And he had blue eyes and blonde hair. My natural hair color is blonde. You just would never know it. But both my mom and dad neither of them have blue eyes or blonde hair. And I got that trait from him, and I got a lot of his artistic abilities.
Oh my gosh. No,
and
I
like,
have that written down. Your creativity. You have your creativity in common. And okay. Yeah.
That's probably him. He also had like a workshop that he worked in when I was little. And he like showed me how to hammer nails in a like block of wood in my name, like when I was like 7 or like 8. But he always was very much the hard worker type, and created a bit of a legacy for him and my mom's side of the family, like in the Los Angeles area before I was even around, but like made it happen. Like he was a very go-getter, make it happen type of guy. And he was like a handyman, and he could build anything. And so like, that's what that sounds like.
Yeah. Wanted to build something. Yeah.
Thrifting was probably my bubby, who was his wife. And she passed before he did. She actually passed really suddenly.
I was seeing an older gentleman who like did something with his mouth. Did he have a habit of doing that?
Yeah, a little bit when he was older. Like
like he was like just playing with his mouth a bit, like a lip thing. Yeah,
he like licking his lips, kind of. And
yeah,
that's probably my papa.
It's definitely your papa. And the fact that, you know, he was acknowledging that I'm her dad, but not how you think, you know, and you call him papa, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I do have a stepdad, which is funny, but you're not describing him because he is not the most handy kind of guy. Like we joke with him that he's not as handy as.
And he is living too?
Yeah, he's living. My stepdad's living. My dad is living. My dad is just not doing well right now.
Your papa, he knows them enough to be able to talk about them.
Yeah, he could talk about both of them.
Okay. I think he was showing me that someone is named after someone.
My brother is named after my dad.
Do you know anyone who works with trees, like replanting?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. Maybe put a pin in that and ask around or think about it. Because someone was showing me like planting trees or reforesting or something like that. It wasn't very specific, but it didn't seem like normal gardening to me. Do you ever feel like you get signs from your papa, like especially around like celebrations or special occasions, your birthday?
He died around Yom Kippur. And generally speaking, I feel like his energy mostly around. But there was a time when I was driving, it was when I lived in LA still, and I was driving past the cemetery where he and my bubby are buried. And it was on the freeway. It wasn't like on the street in the cemetery. It was right next to it. It was like a very high traffic, big freeway. And I was driving past it, and my music changed on my music, and it changed to an Iron and Wine song that reminded me of him. And so like I remember like getting weirded out by it, being like, I didn't change my song. And I got like annoyed that my song changed. But then I like realized what song it was, and I was like, oh, he's saying hi. Got it. Noted.
Totally,
you know? So
hi.
That I've acknowledged that before. I think I just generally feel his presence at my parents' house. He lived at my parents' house when I lived there when I was in my early 20s, and the room that I now stay in at my parents' house was his room. I generally just like feel him around, and my mom is super sensitive and she won't admit it, and she sees him out of her peripheral in the house walking around in his underwear. Like fully sees him. And like she saw him sitting in the backyard one time while she was in the kitchen, and she said on the phone one time when she and I were on the phone, she could hear him breathing.
Wow.
So like he's around,
yeah,
like perpetually. I don't think it's always on holidays, but I think during Yom Kippur we especially think of him because that's when he passed.
Yeah, it was just brought up specifically, like there's a sign And it happened during like a celebration of some sort, as like a specific acknowledgement to that.
Yeah, that's probably, I mean, it's not like the happiest celebration, but like,
sure,
it is a time where family tends to gather.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a celebration of sorts, just like a more morbid one, I guess.
Your story about the song is just fascinating to me. And I know that we can easily discredit it or dismiss it, but I would just really love to pass along the message that he is there for you and you are still connected, and that doesn't ever change. Just to switch gears a little bit, is there an element of your family where someone was kind of talking about a little bit of conflict and strife, like someone who just stirs something up to stir it up, or just, I mean, we don't have to talk about it a lot, but there was an acknowledgement of that too, like, oh, again, or just, I think they wanted to offer you a bit of calm when it came to that, like they get it and they're acknowledging it.
I think that's probably like in regards to my mom, because my mom and I, like our entire lives, without like giving away too many details, like we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
But we are very similar and we butt heads a lot. And so it's been like explosive at times. Like when I was a teenager, it was bad. I was like teen angst to the maximum. And like throughout my life, there's been a lot of challenges. And I know both of them were around that a lot when I was that age.
Okay.
So that's probably what that's in reference to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
But there's also an acknowledgement of balance.
Yeah.
That so I think that I don't think they were bringing it up other than to be like, remember this, you remember, and that there's an encouragement of don't worry, just do, like, find the emotional balance in things, and to not, we all know what our triggers are, but if we can notice our triggers and kind of observe and remove ourselves a little bit from it, and because I don't think anyone ever wants to see who likes conflict. I mean, I hear people say they like conflict, but I don't know if I necessarily.
People just like to be right all the time, and they don't realize it causes conflict. That's what it is.
Not in a bad way, but is there a little bit of perfectionism that runs in your family? Not in a necessarily like I need to be perfect. It's more like it's almost a judgment thing, where
for sure.
And I think that they're acknowledging that the vulnerability underneath that where it really stems from, is that just when someone feels vulnerable, that's our way of controlling things through perfectionism and stuff. And I think they just want to relate that they understand, and also just kind of like relate to the vulnerability, or, see the vulnerability and respond to that, not the perfectionism. And if you see it in you, address what you're feeling vulnerable about, and secure yourself that way.
Yeah, no, that makes like a stupid amount of sense.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's very, very relevant. And I think that applies to all the people that you're discussing. And it's, I think, a familial trait too, is that there's always been high expectations to perform or like fit a cookie cutter, if you will, of what expectation should be. And I've never been that. And my mom has never been that. But there's always like this trickle down effect of expectations from parents that, like, we could call it things like trauma or lots of other things of like stuff that, like, how people were raised in the 50s and 60s is very different than how people are raised now. And, like, awareness of like how therapy can be helpful for things of that nature, and like understanding why you do the things that you do and why you feel the need to be perfect or control things because of why, right? Like, I think I go to therapy. I know these things about myself. This is not news. But it's interesting to hear the acknowledgement of one of the roots of where that might have come from.
Yeah. I think when we we pass on, we gain this perspective of, oh, that was silly. You know, like we retain ourselves, but at the same time, so much falls away that, you know, we can let go of so much of our worries and concerns and the things that we put importance on. And they certainly want you to be able to break that cycle, you know?
Oh,
so
that's lovely.
Yeah. And it just seems like they're really acknowledging the vulnerability underneath. Like, see me as a vulnerable person who was trying the best that they could. And they understand that you are the same way. And they want to be there for you, to lend you that energy that, you know, it's okay to really shelter yourself and take care of yourself and nurture yourself, right?
I love that. That's so great. Oh, yay. Feel good positivity. Love that.
Well, speaking of which, I do have like one more message to give you that they told me to tell you.
Okay.
And it's along those lines. It says, know yourself through and through. React to the chaos from the outside with your calm on the inside. Like the world is always going to be chaotic, right? We can't control that. But if we can create the calm within ourselves, even in the good times, especially in the good times, so that we can draw upon it during the chaos, you know, it's like cultivate within you, because that's where it's going to come from. It's never going to come from the outside. We're never going to get our validation card fully punched or, you know, have the world quiet for us. We have to create it on the inside. And they just want to say how much they're there for you, and they get it so much. And
that's so sweet.
You know, they just kind of want to acknowledge it, apologize a bit, and be there for you through it.
I love that. Oh my God, I want to call my mom right now and be like, Mom, I talked to Bubby and Papa. Like, oh my goodness. That's wild. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. I just got excited.
No, I love it.
But there's a lot of, you know, I think this is one of the things that sucks about a loved one that has cognitive, you know, issues getting older, is that there's not a lot of time to like get closure.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I'm completely honored to be able to facilitate this for you.
Thank you.
And just thank you so much for trusting me to do that. And thank you so much for giving me your time and sharing this with me.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. Oh my gosh, this was like probably the most incredible reading I think I've ever had.
Oh my goodness. That means a lot to me. That really means a lot to me.
Thank you for doing this.
You're so welcome. And before we go, Gabi,
yes,
you have a podcast of your own.
I do. There's no readings on the podcast except for this one. But the podcast that I have is in partnership with my dear friend Kim Douthit, and it is called Ghoulish Tendencies. And basically, it is we call it a spooky podcast because it could be a lot of different things. It could be a true crime topic. We actually were just featured at the Pacific Northwest True Crime Fest in October. It could be paranormal things. Kim and I are both part of a ghost hunting group. And so we bring the perspective of scullying and moldering, if you will, to topics that are historically dark generally. So we'll talk about like haunted places, weird, bizarre cases, unsolved cases, cold cases for true crime, and then like cryptids, like weird stuff. So like anything, anywhere, as long as it's weird, paranormal, true crime related is game for us. And so you can find us anywhere on that you listen to podcasts. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where have you. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find us.
Awesome. Wonderful. And I will vouch, I absolutely love Ghoulish Tendencies. It is fantastic. And I encourage anyone listening to give it a listen as well. It checks all the boxes.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's such an honor to hear that from you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Would you like to receive a free spirit reading with me? Enter for your chance at italktoghosts.com/guest. Each week, I'll randomly select a name from the list to be a guest on the show Together, we will talk to the spirits who wish to communicate with you, and our session will be featured on a future episode of I Talk to Ghosts. The spirits are waiting. Enter now at italktoghosts.com/guest. Hello and welcome back to I Talk to Ghosts. I have a message from the spirits tonight for someone listening to the podcast right now. What I do beforehand is I have a special meditation that I do to ground and center and create a space for a spirit to come close. And tonight, a spirit has come through for me. They really describe themselves that in life they had troubles, they had a lot of indecision, they also had some mood swings to them. They were on, they were off, switching decisions, switching emotions, just they're really acknowledging that they were a hard person to keep up with. And they also realized that there was a lot of emotional exhaustion that came with having a relationship with them and knowing them. They also described themselves as someone who used escapism in life a lot as a mechanism for avoidance and not dealing with the issues they should have been addressing, or perhaps the repercussions of their actions. And I think with all of that, they want to acknowledge and apologize. I do think that this is a spirit that comes around and gives you signs that they are still here. And the message they have for you tonight is they want to offer so much encouragement for you to be able to lean into stability, lean into relationships, be grateful for the companionship you have in life, the love that you have, the experiences that you share with others, because they are a little worried that they jaded you into just emotional exhaustion and that it might have left you really guarded. So if you feel like this message and situation really applies to you, I hope that you can take the message of this was a specific situation. Not all relationships are like that. And when you do find stability and harmony and love, trust in it and lean into it and cultivate it so that it can thrive and you can have those nurturing, caring relationships that we all crave. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for being open-minded to this message, and I hope it provides you comfort and healing. And with that, dear listener, we've reached the end of this episode of I Talk to Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed the spooky tales that I've shared with you this evening. Do you have a nautical-themed ghost experience of your own? I would love to hear about it. In the meantime, wherever you wander off to, in this world or the next, just remember, come back and visit with me. Have a lovely evening and good night.